And we're back. And it's great to be back. Happy Friday. I hope everybody's had a wonderful week so far, and that everybody's gearing up to a nice, relaxing weekend. So, I don't know if you guys have watched the new Charlie Sheen documentary just yet, or if you plan to this weekend, or maybe you didn't hear about it and you hadn't planned to at all. But I had done a Charlie Sheen documentary a few years ago, and so naturally, when I saw that there was a more autobiographical documentary coming out by Charlie Sheen himself, I was curious to see where exactly it went, how deep, how dark, how revealing. So I checked it out, and I do have some opinions on it, of course. But I figure we'll kind of run through some of the things that were covered in the documentary, and then we're gonna go much deeper because some of the stuff, I mean, they did touch on some of the darkness, but then the way that it was glazed over and the way that it was, you know, the way they kind of just pushed past it and dismissed it, that was a little bit unsettling. And from what I know and how deep and dark I went with it, there's definitely a lot of blanks to be filled. So, what's up, everybody? What's up, chat? Share Bear, Kim, Denise is here. What's going on, everybody? Welcome, welcome. Welcome, any new folks joining us. Anyways, without further ado here. So, first and foremost, I guess the main thing is it was kind of like, in the Charlie Sheen way, it was kind of self-indulgent. There was a lot of kind of more just going into his achievements, what he felt what was a success, obviously. And then, of course, I guess with him kind of glazing over some of the negatives, I'm sure that in some ways making this documentary, he's kind of trying to clean up his image and make up for the past mistakes and misgivings. It was a whole era. I'm sure most of you remember 2011. If you hadn't watched the documentary, or if you hadn't seen the one I'd made, or you don't really know much about it, I'm sure you had at least heard about or remember the 2011 era, the whole Tiger's Blood and winning era. And then when it was revealed that he'd had HIV, he'd been sued by some of his past romantic partners for not revealing his status and potentially exposing them. It was a whole mess. There was so much going on. He'd gotten heavy into narcotics, different narcotics, street narcotics, more so than just the designer drugs that many actors get into. He went pretty hard. So yeah, I don't know, have you guys seen it, or did you guys have a chance to watch, or were you planning to, or have you seen anything about it on TikTok yet? I do know it kind of, it has been overshadowed in some ways by the other Charlie situation, which I mean, that's a whole nother thing, and I don't want to go too much into that or comment too much on that. But all in all, I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I just think it was really tragic that his wife and kids were in the audience for that. So obviously that's, something that's going to be impacting and something that's going to damage them for the rest of time. I think the one kid was like 12 years old, so who knows how they're going to be able to recover from that and have a normal life after. But anyways, I'm sure some of you guys were aware that this was coming out, or are somewhat familiar with his history. I mean, you're all familiar with Charlie Sheen, I'm sure, in the very least. But yeah, no, I did see the news, Denise, and the timing does seem a little bit interesting. It's a little bit concerning, I guess, too, considering I just, the state of free speech, I guess, because I do know that the guy was kind of controversial, and he'd said a few things that had really put people on edge, but I don't think that's anything that calls for that kind of reaction. I guess is all I'm going to say about that. It was a puff piece, a love letter from Netflix, in my opinion. So glad that we're going to talk about this. Yes, I agree, Bubbles. It definitely was a lot more fluffy and gentle in a lot of ways than I had expected it to be, from what I was seeing on Twitter and on TikTok. Yeah, it's glitchy. It's just because it's images. I'm doing like a little image slideshow for while we're doing the intro here. I've got our chat and everything set up on another. Oops, now we're moving around. So yeah, we're gonna switch it up here. It's just a little bit of like an interlude while we're going into the going into it here. It is glitchy, but it's not your TV, it's not your computer or your device. I did it that way just as this little interlude for the background while we're introducing the video here. But yeah, it did seem like I get that they're wanting to clean up his image a bit and give him more of a smoother, more graceful transition into the latter phase of his career. But I mean, if you were gonna mention something, or like if you're gonna glaze over something, just don't mention it at all. Sorry, pardon me. Don't mention it at all is my opinion. So the fact that they did touch on some of these more of the controversial or conspiracy-sided factors, but just kind of like I said, just glazed past it as if it was no big deal. It was very dismissive. Whether guilty or not, I think that approach was a little bit tone deaf. But yeah, that's another reason why you boycott Netflix still. Well, I think too, like I did notice that the way that it was cut up, just from like my own perspective of putting, maybe not like official full feature film documentary style, it's my own version of it. Didn't go to school for it, just do it how I do it. But from the standpoint of how things look when you cut things out, or how things should have some continuity and be sort of like a cohesive storyline, it did seem like there was a lot chopped out. It did seem kind of jumpy in spots. So I think that those who had created this documentary had intended to go a little deeper and a little more details in certain aspects, but it was clipped or cut out from the final cut. Because they sort of brushed on certain things and then like it just jumped to a whole nother topic. Like it just seemed like I don't know. It seemed like there was more supposed to be there that just didn't end up being there. So I figure maybe that whoever has the final decision there on the final cut probably went in with the chopping block, so to speak. But anyways, so I did make some notes. And I'll sort of, like I said, go over kind of what they did, how they did kind of position it, what they did touch on. And obviously, yeah, like some of you guys are already saying, it was kind of like a puff piece. They did kind of romanticize a lot of the, the relationships and a lot of what was going on along the way, and left out pretty large portions. So obviously, too, I'm going to encourage, if you haven't already, to check out the deep dive that I did, afterwards or sometime this weekend, whichever. Because there is so much more meat and potatoes to it that, like, they didn't even touch the surface, in my opinion. But anyway, so it was interesting to watch because obviously there was only so much available online at the time, and I did a lot of my own deep dive research, as well as watching some other different documentaries, reading autobiographies, all these different articles. Went through my own way of doing it and put this whole thing together. So there were bits and pieces that it just was stuff that wasn't necessarily public, like the the Super 8 films that he and his brothers and some of their peers like Sean and Chris Penn had made in high school before they'd even kind of gone into the Hollywood side of things. They'd made a lot of Super 8 films together, kind of emulating Martin Sheen, their father. And so that was something that I kind of discussed and touched on, but obviously I couldn't provide the personal clips of those things if they weren't ever made public yet, right? So there was a lot of that was added to the documentary, that was his own personal anecdotes and home footage, home pictures and stuff that was kind of interesting to see, because to see some of these actors that now are in their 40s, 50s, 60s as teenagers making funny little home videos, it was kind of it was, I don't know, kind of an interesting contrast to what we know and what we have today with YouTube and things like that, and how you see teenagers messing around and how they do videos now versus what they were doing then. And it was sort of there's a lot of similarities to it, so that was kind of interesting. It did also go a little more in depth about how the father's lifestyle and career had impacted them, especially with everything that went on with Apocalypse Now. The one film that they had flown out to be with him on set, and Martin had almost died at like 36 years old. He'd had a heart attack. He was really heavily using and really at the peak of his substance and alcohol abuse. So there was a lot more depth and context there that obviously, as an outsider, I could only give so much to in the documentary. So I definitely could appreciate it for those aspects, that he was it was from his mouth, from his words, from their personal photo albums and so on and so forth. And, getting more of the perspectives from the family members and people close to him. So that gave a little more depth in general, which was good in some ways, and in other ways, again, like I said, a little bit kind of like self-indulgent, just kind of a, everybody kind of circled jerking each other enough in a way. But that's sort of what it is in Hollywood, right? They're always going to be looking on the golden or the glamorous side of things. But he talks about how, like, his early drug use, a lot of it, they were all using a lot of marijuana together. There was a lot of just, normal teenage stuff of the era, oddly enough. There was a lot of the criminal and mischievous behavior that was sort of glazed over as well. They did touch on a few things that had... he had run-ins with the law early on and was able to get away with it, so it kind of alluded to that. But there was so much more going on there that they left out as well. They left out the whole thing where him and his friends had stolen some credit cards, and they would use some, because back in the day, the way it was done, it was all paper, and they'd stolen credit cards and had used receipts and different things to charge back, and had used these cards for all these different things and got caught. But the mother had some friends in law enforcement, I guess. We'll say, and he was able to get away with so much more than what was even touched on in the documentary in the early years. So I did find it interesting that they went so much into the relationship with the father and the brothers and the peers, but it was kind of the everything with the mother was kind of left out. There wasn't really much mentioned to do with the relationship with the mother or her participation and contribution to that household and what how it became to be. Martin became a Hollywood success and so on and so forth. So it was kind of interesting because she did play quite a big role, and the way that they had her kind of faded into the background, was kind of, that kind of bugged me a little bit. But he talked about, his early beginnings, and I guess he had been really affected that he'd ended up losing out on his part in Karate Kid due to his scheduling conflict with his part in this movie, The Grizzly 2, which was like a B movie, like made for TV, really, really not great movie, and he'd always felt that kind of had impacted his career in such a way. So he'd gone into that. There was like certain things that he had felt was important that he had gone into more detail about that, I guess an interesting perspective, knowing that he did go on to have so much success, but then looking back, that's still something he regret. Not being able to make it for that. They wouldn't wait 2 weeks or whatever for this previous engagement to complete before he started out with that. So whatever, that's his take on it. But yeah, the thing with, we're going to get there about Corey Haim. I'm going to get there more about the twins. There was a lot of stuff, like, with the ex, Brooke Mueller. There was so much more stuff that, like, they had, like I said, touched on it, but either glazed past it or had kind of been dismissive about it. So we're going to get there, I promise. But I just want to touch on just some of the stuff that he, like, obviously he had felt it was important because it was a big part of the presentation, right? So yeah, the fact he didn't speak about his mother, that kind of seems strange to me. But he was very, reminiscent of his small-time part in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He had that one little kind of cameo part in the principal's office. I don't know if you remember. But he looked back on that quite fondly and felt that was a big turning point in his career and kind of set him up for success, that he'd gotten a lot of good reviews on that. And for it being such an insignificant little part, for that to still be standing out to him, I guess, that's kind of interesting for what he had taken part in. There was a lot of really big blockbuster movies that he had taken part in early on that he kind of failed to mention. But again, the way that it jumped around and the way that it was cut by the editors, who knows? And there is just the 2 episodes out, so I don't know if they plan to do more or if that's it. That's all. I don't know. But anyway, he did talk more about, he had emphasized Platoon, the movie Platoon, that he'd gotten the first Best Actor award for in his early 20s, and that kind of also was setting the foundation of his career. And he said that it was comparative to Apocalypse Now, like that Platoon for him was like what Apocalypse Now was for his dad, Martin Sheen. So I thought that was interesting, and obviously for some people, that wartime era, all those movies did have a lot of significance for them because of, how many people had veterans in the family, whether they were part of, the Second World War or Civil War, whatever. We had all kinds of war going on the last however long. So when there was all these war movies coming out in the early 90s and going into the early 2000s, it did get a lot of attention. A lot of people felt really emotionally attached to them. So there was that. He said, his one big thing that he had mentioned that was his big mischievous thing that he was able to get away with, that, again, glazing over all these other things that had happened that, and again, maybe the time constraints, maybe just that's what was edited out. Who knows if that was something he was willing to share or not. But there was so much more. But he talks about how in his early 20s, and they were starting to get successful, he was partying with Nicolas Cage, and they were on a plane, and that Nick Cage had gotten on the intercom and was impersonating the pilot and was saying, "Oh, I don't feel well, I'm losing control of the flight," and it caused all this panic on the flight. And when they landed, they were welcomed by 6 cops, but being that I guess the team leader of these police officers happened to be a fan of one or both of them, they ended up getting away with that as well. So I thought that was kind of interesting too, of how many little things along the way that don't even end up ever making it to the media, that some of these stars get away with just by the fact that the people are a fan. Like, how many cases that they're not even having to pay people off to keep quiet about something, or they're not having to push any buttons in any such way, that just for the simple fact that they're famous, or that they have fans, that they're able to get away with certain things, because obviously the amount of panic that would cause on a flight is so dangerous. That whole situation was so careless and so risky, and just happening to be these Hollywood stars that or were children of stars, whether they were fans of even just them or their parents, or not parents, but with Nick Cage, he's related to Francis Ford Coppola, and then Charlie Sheen being related to Martin Sheen. So I think that was just kind of an interesting take, I guess, or just anecdote to add in, just to show that there was so much more most likely happening behind the scenes that we would never hear about unless they chose to share it themselves, and that it's just that simple. It doesn't take too much pressure one way or the other. He did talk about, they very gently touched on, but then again it jumped really quickly to the next thing. So I think there was going to be more to it than what was in the documentary. But they did touch on the time that he'd either accidentally shot or had accidentally discharged a firearm that hit his then girlfriend, Kelly Preston. And that ended up being a whole big thing. And again, it was kind of dismissive. And, she had come forward saying, oh, it was an accident. And they kind of let it all go. So they kind of touched on that a little bit. But I think they weren't planning to go into how much chaos was actually going on. I think they wanted it to be like a slow boil, reaching the chaos that it eventually became, and not really giving onus or credit to the fact that, he had already kind of been a bit out of control and a bit of a partying mess long before 2011. He'd already kind of had that party boy, what reputation, I guess you could say. I don't know. I wouldn't say it was like badge of honor. I was almost going to say that, but it's not really that. But and I guess that's part of what got him onto the 2.5 Men part, was because he kind of had that sort of lifestyle already. But they really, the way they wanted to smooth into it and kind of ease into it in the latter half of the documentary of, then it finally starts ramping up, and when he started using heavier narcotics. But he'd always been a bit reckless, a little bit careless, a little bit, on the edge of seeing the inside of a jail cell. So there was that. He does talk about his intervention when he had first gone to rehab, and his intervention that was placed under the guise of his father's birthday. And he gets in there, and it was a weird combination of people, and it didn't seem like a birthday, and so it was kind of his reaction to that, and the impact that had on his life. But that it didn't slow him down, and there was a whole segment on how things started getting worse and worse and worse, until the point that his father had contacted police to go have him arrested, because he was getting so out of control. He was making a lot of money for his age. He obviously, there was some kind of trauma or impact from the childhood experiences he'd had being in the industry, being on set with the father, with the things happening with the father, and all the different chaotic, risky, sometimes violent situations that he had witnessed. Obviously things were not right there, and when you give the kid, and I guess he wasn't so much a kid, but give this young guy all this money and the fame, it really easily took him away. He got carried away with a lot of it very early on. So they done the intervention. The final thing was, I guess, that Clint Eastwood had called during this intervention and spoke to him and said, you're worth saving. And that was like the final straw, that broke the camel's back for him. And he went off to rehab. He kind of talked about lovingly how he was able to talk his way out of rehab for a night to go be able to be a judge of the Hawaiian Tropics bikini contest in Palm Springs before doing his full stay and going into the life of sobriety. So there were certain things like, it was so very Charlie Sheen of him, of what he felt needed to have more details and what they went more into versus some of the more serious and concerning aspects that, like I said, once again, that were basically glazed over. Because he thought, he kind of was proud of that he was able to talk his way in and out of all kinds of mischief, which I don't know if that's something that's, something to necessarily be proud of, but it was that was Charlie Sheen, and I guess that's what made him such a, it is who he was. It made him such a character as a person, not just as an actor. He talks about he kind of was like really boastful about getting parts offered to him, even when he was at his lowest points. That he was always kind of able to rise from the flames and have a new opportunity offered to him, which again, I think is in part due to the pull his father would have had in the industry and just the name. And, I think there was a little more to it than that why he was getting away with these things and still being offered parts, whether it was friends or their pull in the industry or the father's pull in the industry. There was obviously just, he lucked out quite a bit for being quite the messy, chaotic individual. For him to be able to keep bouncing back was quite miraculous. He had mentioned that he was offered the part for Hot Shots while in rehab, and locked that down. So he was pretty proud of that. He then goes really into a long, loving, I wouldn't say tirade, but a very loving spiel about how he had first met with Heidi Fleiss, the Hollywood madame, that he had ended up embroiled in a big controversial scandal involving that. He was actually facing charges for his participation in that, and the only reason he got caught was because he had given her traveler's checks with his name on it that went back to his bank. So when she got raided and they came across, the files and paperwork and what have you, that's what gave him up. And they go into this whole thing about how, he was offered immunity to rat on Heidi Fleiss, and she was kind of upset about it, thinking he was only going to get a slap on the wrist anyway. It was a whole thing, but it was like a whole 26-minute segment in the documentary. So obviously, again, that's something that he felt was important to put out there, that he didn't necessarily mean any harm to her, and that he considered her a friend, and it just what was the pressure and so on and so forth. So he kind of went into that, and I think they put a lot more emphasis on that, of him being that like Hollywood playboy, hanging out with all these escorts and being this thing, and of course that then leading to the HIV status and how that was kind of used against him in a lot of ways. He kind of made it out like in such a way that he was like a victim to some of it, which I obviously don't agree with. But it's sort of, again, in his Charlie Sheen way, that he's like, oh, oops, I did it again, sort of thing, So they went into that, and, they talked about that, he'd spent over $50,000 with her in just under 2 years or whatever. He talked about how his first, that it was appropriate, and that it kind of had set the course for that type of lifestyle, because he had lost, his first time had been with a call girl when he was 15, and he had used his father's credit card for that. So certain things like that he was open about, and again, kind of like talking about it like as if it was a badge of honor, which again kind of, shows that his perception of who, I don't know, like it's a little skewed. It's still a little skewed. There's still work to be done as far as understanding what kind of things were a good role model thing and maybe what wasn't such a good role model thing, especially now that he has kids that are getting a little older, that are becoming adult age, and obviously will have been impacted by some of the things he had done back in the day, and what was made public and so on and so forth, right? So, oh, definitely, yes, Kira. Yeah, the twins, like, basically, I'm going to kind of just continue wrapping up, like, what was touched on, but the underage content, the twins, the stuff with the Den Network, the Brian Peck thing. Like, there's a whole bunch more stuff to it that I do want to dive into. But just for those of you that haven't watched yet or weren't planning to watch, I'm just giving a little more context as to what he had perceived to be important about, to mention about his life in this autobiographical piece. It was, almost like 2.5, 3 hours long. And a lot of it, was, again, like some of you guys were saying in the chat already, like, it was kind of a fluff piece. But there were some things that he was kind of forward about that, I do want to kind of skim through it to an extent before we go into the whole meat and potatoes of the stuff with the twins, the behavioral issues, the concerns I have about that, the stuff with Brooke, what the twins had experienced. There was so much more there that, like, they didn't even mention that. So we'll definitely go into it. Anyway, so he talks about this was the other thing too, is some of the stuff he would kind of just randomly come out and say kind of suggested that it was cut up in such a way that wasn't the final product, that they had gone into the chopping block and really cut things down at the knees, so to speak. He had mentioned at one point that he had become dependent on cocaine, but that in some places it wasn't so readily available, and that at one point on set that he was so tired that to wake himself up he had basically he had inserted an ice cube in himself. So that was something he felt he needed to share with the world, and I thought, okay, I don't know if that's to show how desperate that he was to have the effects of the cocaine as a tool for his job, or what exactly, if it was for shock value, or what exactly the whole purpose of that was for him mentioning that. I don't know. But it seemed kind of just abrupt in what he was discussing at the time. It just kind of came out of nowhere and then went back into how he was using cocaine and how it turned into crack use and how it escalated from there. So that was interesting. But anyway, so he goes more into how he sort of almost like, it was like a poem. He had written a poem almost about his first time using crack cocaine and how he was serviced by the girl he was with while he was ingesting it for the first time, and how that was like, the moment of all moments. He was very reflecting very fondly on that, and it kind of took him back a little bit. And although he's saying he's had 7 years of sobriety, obviously he is still battling those demons, so to speak. He goes into he sort of like laments about the moments he realized that the party was over, and that kind of just like sent him off on another course. It almost made him want to go harder, which had led into this 2011 era. So I think in ways he was almost trying to be a little more revealing, a little more truthful about things than maybe what his PR team or what the producers or the directors, whoever was in charge of the final cut, that he maybe wanted to go more into it. He was a little almost more revealing some things that they didn't necessarily want him to. But he definitely was upset when he was realizing that, he can't keep going the way that he's going, but in spite of wanting to, So it was a little more revealing that maybe, yes, he's got the sobriety and maybe it seems like he's come all this way, but I think that some parts of him wish that the fun would have never ended, But anyway, he goes into, getting the part for Spin City, how that led into 2.5 Men. There was big chunks of that seemed like they were missing. So the details on that, and like going into the whole 2011 thing, they really kind of just brushed past all of that. Which that was a whole era, so I don't know how they managed to get that through without, like, I don't know, whoever had Final Cut really, like, they wanted it to be a Swiss cheese job. There was such big pieces missing that were, what made him, that I think did the documentary a bit of injustice. And again, I don't know if it's that he had chosen that or who would have had the final say there, but it was missing a lot. There was a lot just like that I think had more importance to the overall story that it just, it kind of left you wanting more, But anyways, he talks about, they go into the whole, there was another whole like 20 some odd minute segment about meeting Denise Richards on the set of Good Vice, how they had ended up working together on 2.5 Men. A whole love affair, they went into the whole thing, and she had taken part in it, which was interesting to see. Both ex-wives, actually, Brooke Mueller did as well, which was interesting to see that they were all able to participate in this documentary together, with all things considered. But for how much they went into the relationship with Denise Richards, I feel like it was kind of, Brooke Mueller was sort of nubbed out in such a way, and they all both have children together, right? So I don't know if it again was that they had ended up cutting out large portions because of how, because of the image of it all, or what happened there. But we do know that there was a lot going on with the domestic violence. There was troubles with the twins, which we're going to go into more. With what Brooke had been doing, what they were exposed to. There was so much more going on there. So that's more likely, I'm guessing, why it seemed like she was kind of left to the side. But seeing them all being able to communicate together, seeing that they had all kind of seemingly repaired their relationships between him, the ex-wives, the children, that was kind of good to see. Because obviously a lot of damage was done along the way, and obviously life must go on, or the show must go on, so to speak. So they talked about a few things that I wasn't even aware of how he had driven off the same cliff twice within 4 months and miraculously survived. So if anything, to show how caution to the wind he was able to be, and how much that would go to his head of what he could get away with. Kind of touched on the HIV stuff and then how he was, like I said, sued and blackmailed to keep it hush-hush. Or blackmailed to keep it hush-hush for a period of time until it finally came out, and was being sued for having potentially exposed partners to it without disclosing his status. So he was pretty open about that, and it was very, it seemed like it was a big deal for him, that it took a lot of courage for him to admit that he had been active, had relations, voluntarily had relations with men along the way. They had largely attributed that to his cocaine addiction, that was sort of when he was partying, and that, was more what had caused it, and that there wasn't much of that beforehand, which then kind of led into the thing with Corey Haim, and which they did touch on it. But again, it was super dismissive, on the more serious allegations, accusations, just facts in general, that he kind of wanted to sidestep from. And the Corey Haim thing, when we got to that part of it, this is where I was really dialed in, really focused in, like, oh my God, they're actually going to mention it. So where are we going with this, So I was kind of like eager to see, but it was very quickly dismissed. He pretty much said that he should have sued Corey Feldman for the accusations that had been made in his documentary that he had released a few years ago, detailing what he had experienced in Hollywood and what Corey Haim had allegedly experienced. There has been other documentaries and things that have kind of touched on similar stuff in the same circles, like The Open Secret, there's Showbiz Kids. There were so many different documentaries that if you go and you start looking and you see the patterns and you start to see the lines, it's hard to believe that nothing had happened. He was in great denial that he had forced himself on Corey Haim, but I think there is a good chance. And actually here, we'll switch over. I have like a slideshow now for this part. I had like the filler for this. But we can switch over because now we're going to get to the discussion of like the deep, dark stuff. So 1 second here. Let's flip this on. And now we're going to get into it. Because, that was the long and short of it. Which, again, like I said, a lot was left to be desired. They didn't really go into everything as deeply as they could have. Especially with all things considered. With more of what's come out in Hollywood, with the quiet on the set, and with Drake Bell coming forward, all these different people coming forward and speaking more openly about it. Guilty or not, the fact that he was that dismissive about it kind of on its own was a little disturbing. The way that they could have approached that could have been a little more gentle and a little more loving, because obviously the Corey Feldman and obviously Corey Haim had felt victimized at some point in time, and perhaps both of them had felt that was a consensual act at the time, but Corey Haim being 13 at the time and Charlie Sheen being 19 at the time, and kids not being able to consent, this is where the lines become blurred there. So yeah, he pretty much just said, fuck him. Like, that was pretty much his words, fuck him, that he can fuck off, about Corey Feldman. And he had said, you know, he didn't sue him because he wasn't going to give him that attention or whatever, and that he had thought that they were friends, and he felt that it was like a betrayal in such a way. Which, you know, I'm not going to say that he's guilty one way or the other. I'm not. There's no real evidence. He was never convicted. There was never a trial about it. But when we do look at the patterns, and knowing that Corey Haim had died, had an untimely death, he had died very young. He had struggled with substance abuse, alcoholism, all these things. We see a lot of the patterns. It checks off a lot of the same boxes of a kid that had suffered from complex trauma, and whether that was from the industry itself, whether he'd been victimized or exploited by other people in the industry, regardless, I think that it could have had a lot more compassion and care applied when discussing it in this documentary that he had done. But anyway, so it was the set of Lucas that they're figuring this had happened. Corey Feldman and Corey Haim were good friends at the time, and Corey Feldman had said that Haim had disclosed to him that they had an experience, Haim and Charlie Sheen. And Feldman also talks about how Corey Haim had mentioned that he was part of what's called the boys club in the industry, and that everybody does it, that it's normal for young men in the industry to experiment with older men, that it was like I said, part of the boys club. And there are a lot more dots to connect with that. And again, yes, we're going to go into the twin stuff too, because there is a lot going on there too, but there's so much more going on that supports the claims that Corey Feldman made and what had potentially happened with Corey Haim that I think needs to be highlighted. We can't keep this stuff in the dark anymore. This stuff's been going on for way too long. And again, whether Charlie felt that he had forced himself or not, or whether it was consensual or not, or whether it had happened or not, this is obviously a big issue that has been going on in the industry for decades. There has been convictions. And that's what we're going to go into here, because what a lot of people don't know is that Charlie Sheen, and why is this picture not working anymore? Of course it's not. Come on. 1 second. I don't know why this is glitching out. Right where we were getting to her here. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So what a lot of people don't know is that Charlie had a pretty close friendship and working relationship with this guy, Brian Peck, which, if you don't remember, Brian Peck was mentioned. He worked with Nickelodeon way back in the day. He was mentioned in the Quiet in the Set documentary as having been the man that had exploited and taken advantage of a young Drake Bell. He had been convicted for it. He was also close with the Dan Schneider situation, which, again, there was accusations that came out about him with about some of the young girls and with relation to their feet. Jeanette McCurdy had wrote her book about it. We all kind of have come to the conclusion that Amanda Bynes had gone through some shit when it comes to Dan Schneider. But anyways, so there is a connection here that he had a close working relationship with this man. Now, Brian Peck worked with him as a dialogue coach on his show Anger Management. When all these things were starting to come out, he had the network wanted him to fire Brian Peck, but he said that the show would not go on without him as the dialogue coach. So I'm going to play this clip real quick here, and then we'll go a little more into this, because it goes so deep, this whole network of people, that it kind of suggests more so that something must have happened, or that there was more going on than what he's letting on anyways,
It's Selma. Hello. It's my brilliant co-star. It's Brian, my sometimes brilliant stand-in. We are always hanging onto these because we're doing 49 pages every 2 days. That's how we roll.
That's what we said!
I know.
Do you want to run the lines before we show you the dance moves?
Okay, so you don't want to film this, because then America will know.
Yeah, because then we'll know the kind of company that he keeps. So anyway, so Brian Peck, he had, like I said, been convicted for crimes against a young Drake Bell. He then, once he got out of prison, was able to go ahead and work for Disney for with the Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. So again, kind of just showing how people that, even when convicted of these crimes against children, they're still welcomed with open arms in the industry. Now, even to go one step further, this Brian Peck individual, he's been in the industry for a long time working with kids. And in the Open Secret documentary, if you guys ever get a chance to check that out, they show that he has existed in the industry and been preying on young individuals since the dawn of the day. Like, this was back in Growing Pains, back in the 90s, 80s, 90s, with young Leonardo DiCaprio.
Drawings.
Show us a little drawing.
You see, we draw drawings of each other. Brian is the famous artist, and we always make fun of each other and portray each other in silly, satirical ways.
Leo's job on this set, for some reason, is to make fun of me all day long.
Okay, so here we have Robert De Niro, right there. See Robert?
From the beginning, Leonardo Wilhelm DiCaprio was destined to be a spirited boy. He received his first name after swiftly kicking his mother from her womb as she admired a Leonardo da Vinci painting. Born in Los Angeles on November 11, 1974, Leonardo was the only child of George and Ermeline DiCaprio, who divorced when he was just a year old.
Leo's says he was raised in Compton. He likes to make us think that he's straight out of Compton. Mr. Pale as a dead fish belly and blonde hair is straight out of Compton.
He didn't grow up in Compton, but he did grow up in Hollywood. And he admits he wasn't much of a student, preferring to entertain his classmates rather than do his homework.
I was sort of a class clown, and my publicist is looking at me.
Put that. Sarcastic jerk. It sounds well.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
I was going to say. Right now,
Sarcastic jerk. Is it right? Write it now. There it goes. See, you like it?
So this is kind of where, too, I don't know if some of you guys have probably heard me talk about before, the DiCaprio effect, where, most of you guys know that he's ended up, like, his age limit is around 25, that he doesn't date anyone over the age of 25, and he's now in his 50s, and it's getting, weirder and weirder all the time as far as people are concerned. But I think that his experience as a child would have a great impact on how he would behave and what he would feel comfortable with in a relationship as an adult. And I think that when you start looking at his upbringing and who he was surrounded by, it definitely paints a little more of a picture that being in those kinds of relationships, he likely feels that he's a little bit more in control, because as a kid, not only was he probably being approached and being fawned over by older women, but obviously there's the aspect of older men preying on younger boys in the industry as well, that, it's sort of been glazed over for decades, but it's, being more normalized, the conversation about it's being more normalized now. That men can be victims too, that it's not just young girls and young women being preyed upon in the industry and in entertainment. So at least now we're getting there. The world is healing to an extent, that it happens on both sides, and we do need to take that into consideration when we are questioning some people's behaviors. And of course, not that it's an excuse or not that it's any kind of justification, but it is an explanation, right?
Leo, as you know, is the latest, hottest, hunkiest teen idol there is.
Yeah, his muscles.
Look, speaking of hunky, huh?
Leo, what's it like to be a teen idol?
Ask her Cameron. I don't. Well, I see my pictures there, and it's fun seeing those, and I haven't really got the full impact of it yet, so.
I don't know about that teen thing. I mean, I think it's good. I think it's good for publicity, but they don't, it's almost like they're not actors, you know what I mean? And it's like they portray them as like sort of a piece of meat. Like, here's the new cute thing, take a look at him and go, ooh, ah. So I didn't dig that, no. I want to do characters.
Okay, so now the thing with Brian Peck, it goes much deeper, and then it comes full circle. So we're going to go into this deeper now. So Brian Peck was close friends with another guy named Bryan Singer. Now, Bryan Singer was the director of the X-Men series, some of the biggest X-Men movies that existed. Now, Brian Peck and Bryan Singer were so close that Brian Peck got a superseding or a more visible cameo than what would be considered the great Stan Lee in the comic book world. You can see them in the frame together here, but obviously Brian Peck front and center, and then Stan Lee kind of hiding behind him there. And as the camera pans across, Brian Peck gets the bigger, more prominent view in this cameo over Stan Lee. So it kind of just shows that they were pretty close. Brian Peck had also participated in the director's commentary of the X-Men series with Bryan Singer. So it does show that there was a lot of closeness there. Now, Bryan Singer, and I promise this goes full circle, so just stay with me, guys. Now, Bryan Singer had found his fame and had been able to follow through and work his way up to having these big directorial positions, like in the X-Men series. He had started off with a movie called Apt Pupil, and that was back in the mid-90s. And that movie that he was worked with a young boy named Brad Renfro. And if you don't know, Brad Renfro had a very similar situation and demise as Corey Haim. Now, from this movie, Bryan Singer had multiple accusations from young men for a particular scene in this movie that they had used the movie and filming the movie as an excuse to film the scene, but it seemed a little more predatory than having any sort of artistic merit. So now there's a pattern there. And now Bryan Singer, he ended up being an investor in what was called the Digital Entertainment Network. Okay? Now this ended up being kind of like a Diddy situation where there was a mansion with parties, there was certain movies and series and TV shows that were kind of used to lure young men into this circle, and they would have these parties, and these older men, including Bryan Singer, this guy Mark Collins Rector, and some other what you would call the gay A-listers, had participated, and they were all in on it. They were all having this party atmosphere in a similar way to the Diddy situation, long before the Diddy situation. And the guy that was responsible for that was Mark Collins Rector. Okay? Now, Mark Collins Rector was facing charges, but he had ended up escaping to Spain, and it was a whole thing. Now, Mark Collins Rector was not alone in this. His Ghislaine Maxwell was a young man named Brock Pierce. Now, Brock Pierce, this is where it all comes full circle, had worked with Charlie Sheen's brother, Emilio Estevez, on all of the Mighty Ducks movies, or at least 2 out of the 3. He was in the Mighty Ducks movies. So it all comes full circle, and the way that these groups are all interconnected in such a way, and, you know, the old saying of birds of a feather flock together, and for taking his stance that he did for Brian Peck and wanting to continue to allow for him to have this career way later on, way after having these convictions, way after it coming back to light, the whole stuff, like all the stuff that was coming out with Amanda Bynes and Drake Bell, all these other people in the industry would have known what was going on at the time, and, you know, people like myself had sort of been deep diving and talking about this stuff for years, long before the Quiet on Set documentary that had ended up confirming some of what I had suggested in that documentary, in the Charlie Sheen documentary. I had connected the dots to the fact that Drake Bell had been the victim of Brian Peck, because to that point it was an unnamed child victim. But I kind of connected the dots, and I'd sort of been building the foundation of what has now become, you know, and not completely by myself. I'm just a drop in the ocean of influence, of course. But what then became the big reveals that started happening in the mainstream media with Quiet on the Set, and then some of these books and other, podcasts and things that some of these young child stars are now doing. And, we are now starting to be able to talk more openly about the trauma and the addictions and all the things that come along with what was likely abuse in the industry, what was likely, something really awful had happened to these kids, and that's what had ended up leading to them having troubles later on, whether it was legal troubles or struggling with substances or alcohol or what have you, right? So there was so much more to it, and you could go deeper into that if you want. I go right into the whole thing, and it's circling back to Corey Haim and some of the other figures in the industry and who they connected to, the different connections within Disney and so on and so forth. So that again would be a reason if you whether you're going to check out the Netflix Charlie Sheen documentary or not, definitely check out the one that I did a few years ago, because it goes way deeper into all that, and it does connect so much more with some of the other videos I've done, like I said, to do with Amanda Bynes and even Britney Spears, so on and so forth. They all connect in such a way because, in real life, in society, it's what they say, 6 degrees of separation between people, that between in your community, that between 6 people you'll know that other person, or whatever they say. And in Hollywood, it's 2 degrees of separation. So there's a lot more interconnectedness and a lot more going on behind the scenes together than you'd really realize, right? So anyways, that was, I think, the one big, blaringly obvious standout situation that, having just glazed over it, and there being so much more to it that, we needed to talk about it. I needed to talk about it. I couldn't just sit back and let it go the way it was. But the thing with the twins now, with Brooke Mueller, the relationship he had after Denise, he'd had the daughters, and then after they split up, he ended up, during his whole drug-fueled journey, adventure, whatever you'd want to call it, that he had met with Brooke Mueller, and they had been quite the pair, quite the partying pair together. And when they broke up, there was a whole thing with the twins and what she was doing. Brooke Mueller at the time, they didn't talk about any of this in the documentary, but her drug use and what she was doing and what the kids were being exposed to at the time, the twin boys, led to some pretty serious behavioral issues and questionable things that suggested that they had been deeply scarred and emotionally damaged. Basically, she had been taking them around to hotels with her while she was going on her little drug and sexual trysts. There was things that they were hearing and experiencing and witnessing, allegedly, according to one of her former assistants, that they were witnessing that was most likely to what had contributed to these behavioral issues that they started having as they were getting a little older. Now, when they were divorcing and when Brooke had to go into rehab, or she went away for a while anyway, I don't know if it was rehab right away, but she did go away for a while. And the twins ended up going to stay with Denise, his other ex-wife, Charlie's other ex-wife, Denise Richards, because Charlie was in no condition to take care of them, and Brooke was totally off the deep end. At one point, she'd been arrested because she was like barefoot at this bar at like 10 in the morning, and nobody knew where the twins were at the time, and they'd been left alone at the hotel, and there was open pill bottles and all this stuff. There was a few different instances similar to that where hotel staff had realized that she had left, that the kids were still in the room alone, and so on and so forth, that they had ended up, it just all started coming to light that they were not being properly supervised or cared for. So they ended up going to stay with Denise. Now, Denise, at one point, had come forward, and actually, I'm not sure if she had intended for this letter to be leaked or not, but she had written a letter to the courts, or to whoever, wanting to relinquish the twins because of their severe behavioral issues. They were violent towards her children, the daughters, and their pets. They had allegedly been smearing fecal matter around on the other kids' belongings and on the walls and making a mess of things. They were really unpredictable with their reactions to things. They'd be hugging the puppy on one hand, and then she'd turn around and they'd be hurting the dog. And all of this was really questionable, concerning behavior, obviously. Some of these behaviors being part of what's called the McDonald triad, which is basically signs that one might become a serial killer later in life, if you show these sorts of behaviors as a kid. And so, not saying that that's what's going to happen or what they're becoming. And for a while I was really concerned with what was going on with them, because you didn't hear anything about them for 5 years or whatever, or it's been a few years, 5-6 years. It had been a couple of years by the time I'd even started doing my deep dive. But anyway, they have been seen in public since. They are a little older now. The one did participate in the documentary, and it was like a brief little summary of, oh yeah, I live with him now, and it's been interesting because we're kind of opposites but the same, and having this little, this is what it's like being with my dad now. But he was kind of twitchy, and he did seem a little bit off in a way, to be honest. But maybe it's just the nerves and being a little more out of the public light or public eye and out of the spotlight. They hadn't really been exposed to that so much over the years, as much as say that his father and grandfather and so on had been. So it could have just been nerves, but he did seem a little bit weird. At least something seemed weird there. And the other son didn't appear in the documentary and hasn't been seen as public as much with Charlie as the other one has. So I'm not sure if if maybe they are still struggling, or what might have gone on for them to be rehabilitated from that situation. I would hope that they were getting the mental health care that they would need after all of that, if in fact they had, here's a picture of them now, if they had in fact witnessed as much as what had been reported in the media to do with their mother, especially being their mother. You know, it's one thing being exposed to all these things as a kid, but then it being their mother, you know, and if she was having, you know, group activities and just different adult drug-fueled frenzies with the kids just in the other room, even just, you know, adjacently to the you know, even across the hall, but you know, it just none of that would be you know, it wouldn't be okay after. It's fair to say they're not okay. Like, I think they maybe are okay now, but they wouldn't be okay after all of that without some kind of mental health intervention. So hopefully they're doing better now. They do seem to be mostly okay, and Brooke seems to be doing a lot better. They all, like I said, seem to have been able to reunite as a family and have been able to mend things to an extent. After several years of him having sobriety and proving himself and being on his best behavior, which, I mean, is the best thing possible for the kids. But obviously there has been an impact. I think at this point, all of the daughters and the wife, the ex-wife Denise, are all doing OnlyFans now. So I'm not really sure how Charlie would be feeling about all that, but that's sort of karma in a way, coming back to get him for the way that he had objectified and treated women over the years. So I don't know how good that is for him or what's going on there. They did kind of suggest that he and Denise might be getting back together potentially at some point. Like it sort of seemed like they were alluding to that she was saying that she still loves him very much. And, you know, I think they're at a point in their lives that maybe they could reconnect, where before she was saying, oh, that she's much too old for Charlie, you know. So I don't know. There could be something going on there, but either way, they didn't touch too much on the domestic as much as they could have between he and Brooke and the whole situation there. There was a lot more to that I go into in the documentary. I do also want to point out that Brooke Mueller was somebody that was named as a person of interest in the Matthew Perry situation when he had passed away, that she was questioned because she was one of the people that had spent time with him in rehab, and they had used together a time or two. So, you know, that was something that kind of had come up that I guess there wouldn't have been a reason to mention it in the documentary, but I felt that it was important to mention that she has resurfaced in the media even before this to do with that. What else? I think that was pretty much the long and short of it. So, I mean, we can pretty much just get to the discussionary side of it, because I did just kind of drop a lot of information on you guys. And if you weren't aware of Charlie to begin with, or the whole situation, or you weren't planning to watch the documentary, you know, I definitely, that was a huge info dump. So, I mean, is there any other questions? Any comments? Concerns? Said a whole lot that Martin Sheen and his brother Emilio would not participate in the documentary, and that means he's still not okay. That's possible. That's very possible. Or they're just in a place in their career that they just didn't want to participate. You know, they didn't feel that it was necessary to put their business out there like that. I'm hoping that he had their blessing, I guess. But, I mean, it could show that there's still a rift in the family, that there's still some bad blood there. Them not wanting to participate. And, yeah, like I said, I did find it interesting that there was not even really any mention of his mother. And she did play such a big part in the upbringing and throughout his life there. The one brother was there, though. Ramon or whatever took part. So, you know, he seems to be okay with whatever has gone on. But, yeah. I'm sure there's reasons, though, that they chose not to. And again, being the older brothers, I guess, too, because a lot of what had happened with Charlie would have been due to their influence in his life and the impact that they had on his life, the upbringing that he had. I think people more and more now do realize that does have an impact on your adult life, that anything that happens to you as a kid is what makes you an adult, you know. And you can't pass off the baton the same anymore, that, oh, they've got an addiction, it's a disease, they just have some big problem. Well, you created the problem, you know. Whatever your family, where you come from, what you've experienced as a kid, that's what dictates how things go when you're older, right? So I think maybe not wanting to take accountability in that aspect. You know, he has kind of tried to come forward and speak up about it here and there in the past, but definitely taking the stance of, oh, like, he's a problem child, and, you know, we've done our best, and for him, right? So definitely not going as deep into the reality of the situation, and maybe that's why that alone, just the older brother and Martin Sheen not wanting to take accountability for the hand that they played in the whole situation and who he became, right? Yeah, I think, well, Emilio's been sober for most of the time, but, I mean, they did do some films together that did suggest that they probably had been partying together at some point. They did that film X-Rated and a few others together that it would be safe to say that they were probably also using together due to the time of the era that it was. You know, so... But I think that he definitely kept his handle on the situation a lot better throughout time, you know, and Martin even had pulled his stuff together early on enough that they were able to kind of step back, and then Charlie was kind of this big mess that they were kind of able to distance themselves from in such a way and to step away from the accountability of that. Which obviously he is responsible for himself at the end of the day as well. His own choices are his own choices, especially as he's becoming an adultier adult. But obviously what he had been exposed to and the type of upbringing he'd had and the exposure on the film sets and with what the kind of lifestyle that his father had, obviously that had an impact. People don't become this crazy tiger blood, you know, whatever thing that he became just on their own, you know, or by accident or by fluke, you know. That's a great question, Bubbles. That's really absolutely awesome question. I guess, you know, the shortest answer for that is, you know, I got a story of my own. You know, I've got some experiences of my own, and I guess I've had enough of a taste of certain things in the world between trauma and exposure with things in my own family and trauma and addictions, and, you know, all of that's been a common theme across the board, you know, throughout my life with people I know, and like I said, with my family and stuff I've experienced, that I guess it gives me I don't know. It gives me a different viewpoint of these things when you look at it from a human perspective. I think with people living their lives on the public stage, it's so easy to discredit them and to dismiss them for the problems that they have. But if anything, they're the best example we could have to better understand ourselves, because society is a mirror of the entertainment industry and vice versa, right? And I think that being able to better understand trauma in general and, you know, what makes people tick, the human condition, all these things, by studying the people that live the world on the life on the world stage, we're able to learn more about ourselves. And I think it started with me wanting to better understand my own upbringing, the people in my life, the adults that had made choices that they'd made. You know, there was a lot to begin with, that it was sort of my own personal journey, I guess you could say, but going further, you know, it was something that I felt that it needed to be discussed on a bigger level, more openly. That, you know, again, like I say, you know, every drop in the ocean of influence counts, and I think just each and every person that's contributing to that conversation overall is helping take away the stigma, helping people feel less alone, helping us better understand ourselves and our families, and normalizing the conversation, because I think a lot of why people want to escape or want to use substances or want to, you know, get away from themselves is because of these what would be called demons, but, you know, it's these bad memories or these bad experiences or these residual emotions or feelings that came from a place that you didn't understand yet, or you weren't old enough to know better, or so on and so forth, that do creep into your life later on. And rather than trying to escape it and run away from it, that if we can all be running more towards it and be more compassionate and empathetic about it, that we're getting closer to undoing generational curses, you know, and for the sake of the next generation, for the sake of the healing of our own inner children. I don't know exactly what specifically. I guess there was no short answer. Sorry about that. But I guess there was not any one specific thing, but more so a combination of things that got me wanting to do this way rather than it just being a personal study, you know, like I said. But I guess it kind of started because I would watch these documentaries, or I would read these autobiographies, or I'd be looking into stuff that I had an interest because of experiences I had personally, and it would always leave me wanting more. There always seemed like there was more to the story that these documentaries didn't touch on. Like, I'm like, oh, there's got to be more to that, you know? And I would read into it, and every time there was always so much more to it, and I would end up on this whole rabbit hole and reading for days and days into this thing and researching for no purpose, you know? I would just be doing it just for my own personal interest. And it got to the point that's like, I'm doing all this research and I know all this stuff about this stuff, that maybe I should just start sharing it. That this is something that maybe other people would be interested in knowing, because all these people watched this documentary and thought that was it, and didn't realize, you know, that there's so much more to it, and maybe I should do documentaries that go deeper, you know. So it kind of started that way, I guess. And it was sort of a marriage of all of the interests that I had, I guess, at the time, and from the knowledge and experiences and curiosity, I suppose. It was sort of a unity of all those things. And I've always kind of been a creative, and I've always liked writing. I've always liked, you know, stuff to do with computers, you know, graphic design, stuff like that. So it all just kind of came together in such a way. And now here we are. So I definitely like doing more like the long form, deep dive documentary style stuff. You know, here and there I kind of drift into, you know, the current events and stuff. And, you know, I did covered the Diddy stuff. I covered, you know, the Ruby Frankie and Jody Hildebrandt stuff a couple years ago. There's certain things that sort of stand out to me that I'll end up getting on and covering the current events of it. But for the most part, I definitely like going right into the depths of stuff, and, you know, no stone left unturned, and really getting to the raw reality of it, beyond it being just some glorified, sensationalized Hollywood fucking scandal, you know. Pardon my language, but a lot of it just seemed, it was like glorifying and just making a whole spectacle of it, rather than being able to look at these people like humans. And a lot of these people have sacrificed their childhood and worked their whole lives to entertain us, and then the least we could do is respect them as other human beings. That, you know, whether they have fame or fortune or whatever, that doesn't make them any less human. That doesn't mean they're not capable of experiencing complex trauma and different variations of abuse, and if anything, a more highly concentrated and magnified and amplified level of abuse, and psychological warfare and narcissism and all these things that affect us all, that plague society, you know. And they're kind of under that magnifying glass of it. So I think being able to unpack it, like I said, it helps us better understand ourselves, better understand where we're going, how we got here, where we came from, and what we can do better, you know. I think we should always be learning. We should always be trying to improve, because if we're still, you know, basing our mental health information and knowledge from guys that wrote books fucking 100 years ago, that most of them were addicted to cocaine, like, it's no better than hearing the wisdom of Charlie Sheen when it comes to mental health, you know. Carl Jung wrote love letters to cocaine, you know what I mean? So when you think about the time and the era, and then we kind of stagnated, you know, we're the age of information, but for some reason we had stagnated with the improving and innovating and expanding on our knowledge base in so many factors, you know. I think it's important that we start questioning psychology and the way that we look at addictions, the way we look at all these things. Sigmund Freud, yeah, he was a cokehead too. So I think it's up to us, though, to start unpacking it and looking at it and a better understanding ourselves, because for so long, the way that we approach mental health and the way that people were punished for the results of trauma, if anything, then treated for it. And, you know, they're so quick to just hand out medications and numb people to the root cause of these addictions, or depression or anxiety or so on and so forth. And there's more to it. I think if we could be looking at the root cause and we can better understand that and be more open about it and have these open discussions as a society, rather than it being a shameful thing and oh, you're diseased, or oh, you're powerless, or, you know, you're this defeated, terrible human being because you do drugs or whatever. You know, we don't need to be looking at people like that anymore. And I think that it starts with how we approach these situations with people in the media, and how we view them, and how we, you know, even with like this Justin Bieber thing recently, which I thought we'd made leaps and bounds, but the way people were responding to Justin Bieber having his kind of crash out there for a bit, and how similar it was to when Aaron Carter crashed out, and then what that led to, you know, and I thought we'd learn something, you know. So, you know, there is still hope, but I feel like we keep getting so far ahead, but then we keep moving back 2 steps. So I think that's where a lot of the passion and the drive to want to keep pushing it forward comes from, because I keep seeing the glimmer of hope of that we get it. We're going to get it. We're going to start treating these people with more respect and more compassion that are going through it. And when you can put those pieces together so easily, I mean, we know what was going on with the Diddy situation. We know that these young guys that were exposed to him ended up having all these problems later. And you see the pattern over and over again. You see with Britney Spears. You see with Amanda Bynes. You see with, and the ones that never made it, Jonathan Brandis, Brad Renfro, Corey Haim, those young guys that never made it, because it was still such a stigma even for young boys to be able to come forward about abuse, So there is still so much work to be done, but I think we have made a lot of progress, if we're looking just in the past couple of years versus like the last 10 years, we've made more progress in these past 2 years than the last 10 combined, so I think we are getting there, and I think that's kind of what helps drive it forward and push it forward too, to want to speak more about it and keep going in different directions about it. And I think you guys probably by this point you realize that pretty much everything I talk about and everything I go into is some way related in one way or another to the bigger picture, to the great big elephant in the room, and whether that be the cause of trauma or the outset of trauma, it all kind of goes hand in hand too, right? So I guess with the Charlie Sheen thing, there was a lot of things that I don't know why I chose some of the subjects I did really anymore. I think that just there was enough to sink my teeth into with regards to the human condition and like I said, trauma and addictions and so on and so forth, that they just made sense. And then the more I started reading into it, the better I was understanding it all for myself and for those around me, and for, because I think we all know, whether we've, our own selves have struggled with substance abuse or alcoholism or any other kinds of addictions, we know somebody that has, it is that common. So to be shaming people and to be sweeping it under the rug nowadays, it doesn't make any sense. There's no reason that we can't be more open about it and we can't be a little more compassionate about it. It's absolutely a tug of war. You're right. Yeah, Kira, a lot of people were back then, and this is the thing too, is, the more I've dug into things, and the more I've read into things, the more that I've kind of destroyed my childhood, I guess you could say, in a way, like a lot of the stuff that I liked growing up. I can't say that I've ever really been a fan of anything per se, but there are, filmmakers or series or shows or whatever, books that I really appreciated and really had a great respect for growing up and coming into my adult years and whatever, that finding out more about it later kind of ruined the illusion. But I think it's important too that we don't have this rose-colored glasses illusion of who all these people are that we look up to and that we admire their work, that there's sometimes more to it, and that they don't necessarily deserve as much praise as we give them sometimes. I mean, everybody knows who Edgar Allan Poe is. He's one of the greatest horror writers of all time, and he married his 13-year-old cousin. Same with Jerry Lee Lewis. I think, was it Jerry Lee Lewis or the other guy? I don't know. I mix them up every time. But there was the one guy that he had married his cousin that was 12 or 13 years old. And these are people that end up standing the test of time as far as appreciating of their literature or of their work, right? And so then that's kind of goes two ways, because in some ways it's like, well, should we throw away, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, or whatever they say, that maybe we should still be able to appreciate their work without advocating for what that person was doing, right? But the more you look at how common it was, you look at with like Elvis and Priscilla, you look at I mean, it just goes on and on. I can't think of any other ones right now. I'm a little bit tired. It's been a long year. But, the Alice in Wonderland guy. Was it C.S. Lewis? I think it was C.S. Lewis that did Alice in Wonderland. But the Alice in Wonderland guy was in love with a little girl. He was in love with a 4-year-old, and that's what he wrote that story for. And Alice in Wonderland is one of the most celebrated pieces of children's literature of all time. So, I mean, it's one thing to still want to appreciate that content, but probably people should have informed consent to appreciate the content. Maybe they should know more about where it came from, rather than having it so glorified in the media and, in schools and in class or wherever, or just in the media, right? Because it's been so common the whole time, and then we've kind of been so ignorant to the reality of it, right? Yeah, it's hard. It is hard. Like with Stephen King, I grew up really appreciating horror and some of his work, and then finding out that at the end of it in the book, they had written a child group activity that was not not appropriate. That sort of throws a wrench in it. It makes you wonder if, well, was he really one of the greatest writers of all time, horror writers of all time, or was it just that he was catering to some sick and evil powers that be? You know what I mean? Because in my opinion, Dean Koontz was a really excellent horror writer, and I don't think he's ever had a movie made of any of his work. And I mean, there was guys like Thomas Harris that were like a flash in the pan, and they did like the Silence of the Lambs series. And that did really well, and he was just sort of got in, got out, and got on, and I think that doesn't happen as often, but that shows more of the actual talent and the actual writing skill being embraced and given credit for, versus some other content that maybe it was more about who they were catering to versus it actually being a good horror novel, you know what I mean? But it was fed into us for so long, and so much of his work was turned into movies, and he's just been such a constant over the years that nobody ever thinks to question. But then you look at Firestarter with Drew Barrymore, and at the Firestarter rap party, which Firestarter was a Stephen King story, at that rap party for that film, that's when she was given her first drink, and it was 2 glasses of champagne, and there was 2 men, unnamed men, she never named them, but that they had goaded her into drinking these 2 glasses of champagne, whether they had bet her or dared her or whatever. And she chugged these 2 glasses of champagne, and she ends up, the next thing she remembers is waking up in this bedroom to her mother asking her what happened. And there's just so many things wrong with that I can't even begin. But I think you're right there with me on it. I don't even have to say what's wrong with it. You get it, right? But Dean Koontz did make a movie. I never even heard. And I was, I was never really a fan of one or the other, but I just had always been into horror, I guess, growing up and stuff, and more the psychological though, and again, probably just trying to better understand all the horrible things happening around me as a kid, and trying to make sense of it all. And maybe horror in some ways was an escape because it was different kinds of horror too. I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. As I get older, the more I realize I don't know. And I think that's part of life. Is you're always learning, right? You're always exploring and gaining more experience and wisdom. And if you're not, you're dead, right? So, or you're stagnant, right? Only the Koontz movie you can think of is Hideaway. Love the book too. Much to watch the movie. I'm gonna look that up because I didn't even realize. It's one of those things that I've now noticed over time of the people that we end up celebrating and that do well in the industry are not necessarily the most deserving, So I've kind of just one of the examples, but I actually never really looked if he did or not. But I figure that's one I would notice because I do know I appreciated a couple of his books back in the day, and that had a movie came out, I think I would have noticed it, or it would have caught my attention, but I guess not. Hideaway, 1995. Okay, so he was trying, but how do you compete against a children's orgy at the end of it when everybody, it seems, that built the industry has that affliction? Do you know what I mean? So then, yeah, he did even do movies, but even people that appreciate his work didn't even know about him because it's overshadowed by all this other, things that are have a bigger backing by the studios and by, have a bigger marketing budget and so on and so forth, right? Intensity was my nightmare. I don't think I've seen that either. Adult read, knowing what I know, can't Dean or Steven, yeah. Well, and some people, I guess too, they rather just stay all the way away from horror too because it's brings up certain things, or it's just not your taste, and that's cool too. That's fine. I guess it was just like my early entry into wanting to better understand mental health and abnormal psychology and all these things. It's sort of horror tended to be the example of that, and then getting older, digging into the things they don't show you on the surface, all the darkness that can exist behind doors where happy little wreaths are hung, because it seems that the most evil is generally covered up by the guise of good, where horror is very frontally just a horrific thing. It's horror, right? But sometimes it's the movies that you think you would never suspect, like the sets of these kids movies. You just you would never suspect, but there were kids being abused on those sets, and it was like our childhood joy was their childhood nightmare, their horror. So there's no horror movies that I can think of that can compare to the real horrors of real life, and maybe that was part of the being an escape too, in such a way. I don't know. I don't think Dean Koontz did anything. No, I don't think he did anything. He's one of the few, I think that I could never find anything about him. I never really looked too deeply into him, though, but, like David Lynch. David Lynch is an example of a director that I appreciate, that I've never heard or found anything too wrong about him, except for the fact that he participated in that Spielberg movie. And I don't know, I have some feelings about Spielberg that we won't go into here, but... An example of a kid's movie that we all know and love, Little Rascals, was a Spielberg movie, and Alfalfa, Bug Hall, was abused on the set of that movie by 2 crew members, and that abuse continued, allegedly, this is what he claims, continued from movie to movie, starting from the age of 8 going onwards. So the amount of stuff happening on the sets, not saying that Spielberg specifically is guilty of anything or any wrongdoing, but it just seems that there's a pattern there too. River Phoenix had worked with those similar people, similar companies, and with him being the head. But yeah, no, let's not get too off track. I could go on about that for ages, but the way it all connects and the patterns, it's hard to unsee the patterns once you've seen them, and when you see it playing out with some of these young child stars, and with the case of Corey Haim and with the Charlie Sheen situation, there's no doubt that something had happened to Corey Haim, and now whether or not Charlie had anything to do with it, or whether Charlie and Corey at the time had felt that it was a consensual act or not, that's a whole other thing. But we know that it was so common in the industry, and what the results of that, the way that it turns out later, we can see the signs now very clearly, so it's hard to ignore them, right? Yeah, definitely, Kim. That's a great comment. That's a really great comment. I wish people took the time to deep dive into themselves and take accountability for their actions and behaviors. We all make mistakes, but we can all learn and better ourselves. Yes, definitely. And I think that part of being able to normalize this conversation and taking the stigma away from it on the public stage is the first step to us being able to remove the stigmatization of us being able to talk about it amongst ourselves and within our families, I've got family members that would be like, what trauma? What trauma do you have? What trauma did you ever experience? And them being one of those people that cause trauma. So, I think we live in a society at the moment that, that conversation just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in families, that people are more apt to, want to just put it under the rug or have it medicated or, send somebody away if they're having troubles due to the trauma they experienced as a kid, rather than embracing and coming together as a family and facing it head on, So I think part of it is all, it all goes hand in hand too. Yeah, I've heard a few people talking about that channel too. Gimli Glavin. What a name. That's a mouthful. But welcome. It's glad to have you. Haven't seen you around these parts yet. We have idolized and glorified faith to such an extent that our experience of it enlists blind faith and an unconditional allegiance to our heroes, but it's persona, not the real person, that is the problem. Yes, I agree. That's yes, you kind of nailed it on the head there as well. That people are blinded by it, and I kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, too, of how much some of these actors and actresses get away with just for the simple fact of being famous, and people being a fan. That a lot of cases they're getting away with something and they're not even having to bribe anybody, or they're not having to put any pressure one way or the other to try to get their way and to cover something up, that people just by the simple fact of them being a fan can be standing there witnessing this heinous thing taking place, or that had just happened, and be able to look the other way just because of the blindness to their heroes, right? So definitely that's one thing that we need to start taking. Need to take the rose-colored glasses off, Like, I feel the older I get, the more I realize we're living in a narcissistic cult matrix, and the entertainment industry and media is kind of part of what shapes that and kind of keeps everybody in line and keeps everybody in lockstep. And we gotta break free from that, because obviously the way we've been doing it for decades isn't working. So we gotta take it in another direction, and it's up to all of us. You know, we're all the, I guess the millennials now are in charge. We're the adultiest adults in the peak. We're at our peak age now, and you know, we've learned from the boomers and our parents and the parents before us, the grandparents, all the mistakes everybody made. We're the most set with the best foundation possible to be the generational curse breakers. So it is up to us to keep learning and keep having new experiences and keep trying to better understand, if only for our own sanity, the sake of our own sanity, and to do better for our next generations, you know? And whether you got kids or not, that they are our future, right? Yeah, I feel that, Crowos. I think, you know, we're one of many here in that situation. I've noticed, I think, that a lot of the audience here, we're all a product of some kind of dysfunction or toxicity, and we're most of us are the scapegoats or the black sheep that kind of broke off, became the misfits or whatever of the family, and are searching for that information and being able to look at it objectively and think about it, you know, logistically and reasonably, and not wanting to run away from it and pretend like it didn't happen and spend a lifetime of ignorance. You know, I think there's a lot of strength and power in that, and power in numbers. You know, the more of people coming together and feeling less alone and being able to talk more openly about it does help kind of heal those wounds, and hopefully the healing can spread more than the rot. One day at a time, you know. Sacrificial lambs, yep, that's another perfect word for it, for sure. And a lot of us, you know, myself personally, I've just had to disconnect from my own family, and you know, over the years I would keep trying again at different phases of life and in different economic strengths and weaknesses and different, you know, I would approach it in different ways just to be trying to fit in, and then I realized that maybe I didn't want to fit in with any of these people, that the reason I wasn't fitting in is because I felt that there was so much wrong going on and nobody wanted to acknowledge it, nobody wanted to look at it right on, and nobody wanted to take any accountability, you know, or do anything right about it. Everybody just wanted to keep ignoring it and being active in their own addictions or whatever, you know, in their own ignorance. And so it became pretty blaringly obvious to me that the best that I could do for myself was just to remove myself and to not try to reach them on their level, because none of them would ever be trying to reach me at my level, you know, and I'm over here just trying to, you know, trying to heal and learn and do good with my life, use, you know, flip those negatives into a positive, you know, alchemize the pain into some kind of something that could be a good impact on the world, you know. So the same well for the same poison well. Yeah, exactly. You guys know, and that's why I love this community, you know. And sometimes I gotta go away and I come back, or I gotta go away for a while and I come back, and but it's almost like I never left. And then you guys are all, I feel like we got, you know, this strong bond of a community with shared experiences. You know, I think there's a lot of strength to the bond that can be shared through the trauma. That's not an unhealthy trauma bond. You know, I think that there's so much of it's like become a derogatory thing to be bonded by trauma, but because it can be a negative thing, it can turn into a destructive, self-destructive, immobilizing type thing. But if we can talk more openly about it and be more embracing and sharing of the experiences in a positive way, then maybe more people would not want to be escaping it so much. You know, we could escape into the safety and the compassion and the empathy and whatever of society, rather than having to run away from it because it's a punishment and judgment or whatever. You know, a lot of people look down on people that are struggling with substances or with whatever bad behaviors that are self-destructive or whatever, that are escapism. You know, people are looked down upon that rather than asking why that person would be in that situation, you know. And I think each and every time we have this kind of discussion, that more people are becoming a little more aware, a little more informed, a little more feeling less alone, or you know, all those little things I think add up to the bigger picture of where we need to be working towards to heal as a society, because a lot of damage has been done over decades, you know, and it doesn't have not showing any sign of getting any better. So, an scapegoat, there you go. That's inspiring in our project now. There you go. Well, you came at the right time and you found the right place. There you go. That's awesome. But that's it too. And yeah, and you can't force somebody. You can take them to the well, but you can't force them to drink. You know, there's so many good sayings that kind of encapsulate the overall sentiment. But yeah. You recently made a TikTok. My mother's misguided to stay in about my experiencing my mother's experience of me. Interesting. That's like breaking the fourth wall and coming back through the back door and then exiting through the front door. situation. But I think, yeah, like the more we're able to understand it and discuss it, the better we're able to explore it within ourselves and explore it in a creative level. Because I think that's the best thing you can do. You know, from great suffering comes great art, right? You know, the more that you can alchemize that and use that pain and experience and make it into something positive or something that could help others, or if you could be releasing it in an artistic way, like that's the healthiest way you could do it, right? So I'm loving that. You're right where you belong there, Gimli. You found your tribe here. Oh, I know. I probably can't go into it too much, but you know, let's just say this whole year has been quite the uphill battle. You know, trying to be on the forefront of this good fight is not easy, and there's a lot of collateral damage, a lot of casualties along the way. You know, so sometimes you just have to pivot and shift your focus, and sometimes you have to just you know, what do they say? Know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, or whatever, you know. And then you just keep on keeping on. So I don't think it's always going to be a battle. I think trying to stay the course in such a way, you know, it's just yeah, just is what it is. It's all part of it. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Gimli. Yeah, I think for a lot of us, you know, maybe not necessarily just art, but some people like writing, some people it's music, some people it's, you know, whatever. If you can get passionate about something, if you can put your pain into a passion, no matter what it is, that's a positive, in my opinion. Yeah, YouTube, there you go. Oh, thank you, Denise. Yeah, well, you know, I think you guys know, you know, anytime you're gonna kick a hornet's nest, you know, especially with like the Diddy situation and with some of the other stuff that we were touching on, you know, there's bound to be some kind of pushback, right? And that's, you know, the way. There's just different ways that they try to control the narrative nowadays than they used to, and it's more of a digital battlefield now than being a media battlefield or whatever. And there's a lot more independence there. There's a lot more people that are part of it now than it being such a streamlined narrative, which is a good thing. It's all a good thing, right? Well, yeah, that's it, exactly. You're not doing it right if you're not making some enemies along the way. That is what they say, right? People go against the family, and then the smear campaign begins. Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the stuff that, you know, the opinions that people have of me and my family is, you know, I'm the problem child or whatever. I'm the outcast. I'm the this, I'm the that. You know, I had the most troubles, I guess, growing up. I was sent away to be fixed time or two, and whatever. I'm that person, right, in my family. But if anything, like, if I started talking about all the things and what exactly I think about certain people in the family and what is being hidden and covered up and what's the big secrets, it's like, it would shatter their fucking lives, man. But you're not allowed to talk about your trauma, because what trauma, right? But maybe one day I'll tell my story. I don't know. I think I'm kind of warming up to it as I go. You know, I don't know why I'm protecting anybody anymore. Why? What does it matter? I'm not dependent on any of them. I've been, you know, I moved out really young. I've been on my own for a really long time. And anytime I did, you know, try to ask them for help for anything, it ended up being less, you know, more harm than good, more harm than help. You know. So I don't know even why I wouldn't at this point. I guess just for my own mental health of not really needing to go all the way deep into it to have learned the lessons I have and to be able to be the person I am now. You know, it did build character in ways, and I do have a different depth of understanding of certain things. You know, whatever, I can see the positives in it, and it is what it is. But if it's something that could help other people feel more, like I said, less alone and more at peace with themselves, more of a whole, you know, I don't know. Still figuring out my own shit here, you know, through all of this. I think with making these videos and doing this kind of deep dive work is in itself a therapy in a way, and you learn more as you go that way too, you know. Yeah, sometimes you can't even, like, I mean, siblings even are usually the last people that you want to have to leave behind when you're detaching from a family situation. But if they're that ingrained and embedded in the family still, that is such a big part of your trauma, that it can be hard to maintain any kind of consistent or healthy relationship, you know, unless they're able to break away fully from that toxicity and the narcissistic cult dynamic, then, you know, you're kind of just asking to be having your trauma recycled, right? So, definitely, you know, I think, you know, if anything, if nothing else, I hope you guys feel less alone in that aspect, because I do feel that, and I've come to recognize that a lot of us are kind of in the same boat on that aspect, or, you know, in the process of trying to detach from family, or have detached from family, or thinking about it, or, you know. Thank you, Hello Crow. It's good to see you. Good to see all you regular guys coming out. Always miss these talks when I'm off and away for a while. But you know, always come back full force, and here we are again. Yeah, well, and that's kind of when the implosion sort of begins, is when you remove yourself and you can't be blamed as the problem anymore, then a lot of the internal problems start to reveal themselves, and the whole situation starts to collapse. And yeah, if you're not having any participation whatsoever, you're not even in contact with any of them, you can't be blamed for any of it. So then who do they blame? And if you've been the blame for a lot of the family problems to that point, who are they going to blame? Then they actually got to stop and look at it, right? So what a concept. No contact is the key. Yeah, I mean, you know, and I've done it off and on for years. I go 2-3 years without contact, and I would try again, and each and every time I'm reminded why I stopped, you know. And I even had to start just like not even attending funerals, you know, like there was always something to try to drag you back in, or try to get you back into the fold, and eventually it's like, it's hard. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do, removing yourself that way, but sometimes it just needs to be done just for the sake of your own sanity, for the sake of being able to make it to 40, you know. All these young people don't make it, and it's not because they're doing anything wrong. It's because they've experienced a great deal of suffering and complex trauma, and, you know, they lost the fight to that, not to the addiction, not to the demons or whatever, you know. 2 hours pretending to be on the phone again. That's crazy. Oh my good lord. That's intense. But obviously there's a whole dynamic there, unhealthy dynamic there, that has conditioned her to be that way. She's being used as a tool more so than anything, it sounds like. It's like a triangulation situation. Crow oath. Yeah, definitely. And then they're fighting amongst themselves, and like, oh, what trauma? Like, they can't even understand why you've removed yourself. And then there's an argument amongst themselves of what trauma, why would they never want to talk to us again? Why would they not want to be part of our family? You know, well, now you can start to think about why. Maybe you could think about what you did. Go sit in your room. You're grounded. Think about what you did. You know? So, yeah. Oh my goodness, yeah. Yeah, it gets harder almost too as you get older. Like, you maybe better understand things and you have a better grasp on things, but there's new challenges that can present themselves, of course. What? I don't know what that means. Dando damage, I don't know what that means. Missed something there, I think. But anyways, I think, I think we kind of covered the long and short of it here anyway. Got into a pretty good discussion overall. And, as per usual, you know, I think we're becoming more united as a community when we talk about these different things. We see more and more things we all have in common, which is interesting. And not necessarily a bad thing. It's bad that I feel bad that other people have had to go through some of the similar things, but I think it's great when we can unite in a positive way about it, you know? I'm not sure. I think I missed something there, but I'm sorry that you had to go through that. That's awful. The trauma bicycle. Oh. Okay. It's a whole new thing. I'm not familiar with that one. But yeah, I think we'll call it there. What was that? Oh, I guess we're only at like an hour and a half. I guess we could chit chat for another few minutes here. But I do have some other things to attend to. I got started working through the drafts, I guess you could say. There's so many videos that I got so close to, like, you know, 3/4 of the way, and then I don't know, for whatever reason I decided to pivot from there and shift away from it, or just, you know, my own personal thing. I needed to have a better understanding for my own self before I could give it, you know, do it justice. Like for the Drew Barrymore 3, for example, you know, that's been like a 3-4 years in the making now, and I got through the first 2 parts not too bad, but the adult side of it, I feel like there's still so much more for me to understand myself personally and my own journey, that to be able to, like I said, to do them justice, it was difficult. You know, I wanted to have a better grasp of the whole overall, you know. And that's coming along too. Yeah, I've been working on that still, and I don't know. I feel like I've got to just probably put out the first chapter as a sampler or whatever on Patreon for you guys, and maybe start getting some feedback, because I can go in so many circles around the same thing for so long, and I think that happens too with videos and with scripts and stuff. Like, I'm just maybe that's one of my flaws, you know, like I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I'll go around and around in circles and wanting to perfect something, and then it never gets done, you know. So I've been working on, like I said, we're getting through some of those videos that it just was either in circles or I had some sort of obstacle, so I'm starting to get through those. And then I've been working on the book too, which I think it kind of goes hand in hand too, is by writing it out. On one hand, the bigger picture of it all is helping better understand on a each isolated situation, you know, each story. It's all becoming more of a bigger picture, a clearer picture. I don't know, but yeah, I think probably I should just quit going around in circles and at least get the first chapter out as a sample, because I did promise it for you guys that are following along. So I will be getting that going, because it is going to cover a lot of like the overall patterns, like the bigger picture of everything I've covered. It's almost like an all-encompassing of all the videos I've covered and what I've noticed across the board, you know, all the common denominators of truth that we can all relate to as a society, you know, the mirror effect. So I do want to get that going more. I definitely, like I said, I got to put out at least the first chapter and maybe start getting some feedback and get the wheels turning on that, because I'll end up spinning tires sometimes if it doesn't sound just right, or it's not coming out exactly how I'm picturing it, you know. And it happens with videos too, so I've been working through breaking down those the writer's block or the creator's block or whatever, you know. But yeah, so, and then just like I said, like this whole year's been just a trying time, so getting to the other side of that has been been a journey, but we're there now. And I think we'll be getting back, hopefully doing more lives regular again, and being able to be a little more consistent with content, and just going for the straight for the jugular, but from another angle, you know. Still the same fight, same good fight. It's the same great big elephant in the room, just inspecting different piles of shit. Right. Oh, that's a lot, Nancy. Yeah. Well, and sometimes it takes somebody passing away for certain things to come to the surface, but they don't necessarily want it to be fully to the surface, but they want it to be acknowledged. Some stuff, it's delicate, you know, and I guess it's to each their own how it needs to be approached, right? But as long as you're going with a good heart and good intentions, that's the main thing, you know. But yeah, so we're back now. We'll be back on and doing more of this regularly again. I've got my setup back going again, and things are going a little more smoothly over here again, so we can be focused on the primary objective here once again. So definitely we'll catch up some more, and we'll do some more lives, and I still want to get this John Bonet video, this next part of John Bonet done, though, and this other part of Drew that's just been sitting on the side burner for years now. But definitely been learning a lot along the way too, and there's so many new tools and apps and different things coming out that help make the whole process a lot easier as far as editing and producing goes. So that's been cool. It's been helping a little bit too, that once I do get the ball rolling again, you know, I'll be able to be a lot more consistent and be able to be a little more creative, you know, rather than just putting things together. I can kind of put a little more flair on it and make it a little more, more of that professional touch, so to speak. Yeah, sometimes the audio, yeah. I don't know, I've always been into writing, though. Like, my whole life I've always been into the writing thing, and I guess that's sort of why it sort of graduated into this, because there is a lot of writing involved, to write the script and to put things together in such a way. So it kind of goes both ways, I suppose. And over time, I've sort of been exploring it in such a way, and when certain things do come up in videos, like I'll mention, like, I've told some stories here and there, and certain things that I relate to, and, so I've sort of been doing it the whole time, all along the way, but, yeah, I've got to circle back to that, too. We kind of lost touch a little bit there. We were having a back and forth, and then some stuff was coming up, and we kind of kept missing playing phone tag there for a bit, but I do want to circle back to that as well, because I do have a whole file on that, and how that all went down, and that it all goes along the same line of all the things we talk about here, right? And I think it definitely deserves to be looked at a little closer than what the official narrative spun it as. There was obviously more to it, so I definitely, we'll be circling back to that soon, seeing what's going on. I just needed to be in a good spot too to be able to really sit and do a proper interview, and I had to move some stuff around and get a bigger drive, because I have so many clips and old videos and things archived that all kind of contributes to the whole, things are disappearing and being scrubbed from the internet all the time, so I've been very a stickler about keeping archives of stuff, so I was getting overflowed. I had to clear out my computer and to do some upgrades and stuff too. Things were getting a little bogged down, slowed down. A few months ago I had to replace the battery because it was getting bloated, and it was on the verge of having a catastrophe over here. Having that battery explode would have been bad. So just these little things along the way that, little maintenance and upgrade things that you got to do to keep things rocking and rolling too. So we'll be here, getting back on the horse, trotting along. Allie had sent you from her channel, right on. Yeah, I do want to circle back and do a little deep dive with Allie as well. Some little collaborative something, putting it all together into one big overall piece. So yeah, there'll be more of that coming down once we get can get on the same page there, because obviously they've got a lot going on, and I've had a lot going on this last however long, and everybody's just it's just been a whole friggin' year, I think, for truthers anyway. But glad to have some new faces here, and always glad to see the regulars and see the familiar folks. Anything on Jack and Lily? Oh, I don't know. That's I think we know what's going on there. Oh, right on, Kira. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. 1111. Make a wish, everybody. Thank you so much for that. Right on. But I think they know what happened anyway. With that situation, and I don't know. I don't know if they're gonna be found still with us, I guess you could say. But what was that one that just happened too? That Harrow case? What was it? Was it Caro or Harrow? Those two parents had said that the kid had gotten abducted from the Big Boy lot or the Big Star lot or whatever. It was some sporting goods store lot, parking lot, and all was revealed to do with that pretty quickly. And I think that it's a kind of a similar situation to that. Oh no, not again. Oh shit, no, it's not popping up. I don't know if it just did a duplicate thing there, or if it's not showing me the other, oh no. Oh, the alert was underneath. Shoot, sorry. I think it was just like a duplicate thing though. Unless somebody else did just do another, here. Alright, we'll do it like that. So the alerts and stuff are on top. Thank you for that, Kira. I'm not sure though, I don't know. So it did make two noises, so if somebody else did a donation as well, it blocked it out, then I apologize. I'm gonna see if I can even see if it shows me the it's been a while since I did the streaming thing, guys, so I gotta get back to figuring all that out. It always changes. Every time I go and come back, I swear something's changed. Recent events, here we go. I think it just did a duplicate thing. Yeah, okay, it was. Yeah, alright. If somebody else sent too, I didn't want to not thank them. Anyways, yeah. Oh, it did. Oh, that was weird. That was like a weird delay on that. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate that. Things have definitely not been easy that way either. Between the spiritual, digital, and financial attacks happening, it's been a time. So I definitely appreciate that support, guys, for sure. It will go to a good cause. Just keeping the cause going, really, mainly, I guess. Help support the overall here. But yeah, so I think, yeah, I guess we'll leave it at that. Unless there's any other thoughts or feelings about the Charlie Sheen thing you guys wanted to discuss. Or any other, oh man, you guys are fucking nuts. Thank you, guys. I think it's just doing it twice. It's like doubling up on, I don't know why it's doing the alert twice, but it is. I guess that's okay. As long as it comes up the one time and we don't miss it, that's the main thing. I don't know how it is, though. That's just weird. It's being weird. But thank you, guys. You guys are awesome. I really, really appreciate that. And you really do. You don't have to. It's too much. You guys get so generous at times. I really do appreciate it. Alrighty, but yeah, I guess yeah, we'll call it, and yeah, I'll maybe try to start doing them weekly, or at least have content weekly for you guys. I do want to start getting stuff out more frequently again, but again, because I do want to shift more back into the long form doc stuff, it does still take a little bit longer than when I was trying to keep up with the current events with the Diddy stuff and all that. But we'll find a good balance, and like I said, with some of these new tools and like with some of the AI stuff, you know, it's definitely made the process a lot quicker. So we'll find a balance eventually here, and it'll be good. It's a sign of abundance. Yeah, it's double abundance, double jingles. Right on. Alright, well, thank you everybody for coming out. Thank you for the discussion. It's always such a great discussion with you guys. I love that we're always still like so on the same page, and then you guys are always offering more insight. It always ends up being more depth of a conversation rather than just like gossiping or whatever, you know. It's always great with you guys. So appreciate everybody that participated in the chat and lended their thoughts and insight in the whole situation and just in general. And looking forward to getting back in gear here and having more of these, you know, these types of discussions. And yeah, I got more stuff coming down the line for you guys. And keep an eye out too on like Telegram and like Patreon. I've started moving some stuff over to Patreon because yeah, it's, you know, the climate of truthing is getting a little bit rocky, so some stuff I've had to move over there, but most of it is free to all members. There is a free membership as well, and then the paid membership gives you access to like bonus content, and we do have the paid membership room, chat room and stuff now, so I'll start building that out a little more and offer a little more on the Patreon, because I feel bad, you guys, some of you guys have gotten on that, and then I'll go a couple months without doing anything over there, and it's not great value, but I do promise I'll be getting back on there more, and like I said, slowly but surely moving some of the older stuff over to there, so that because it can't necessarily live here, but it can live over there. So keep an eye out for that, and other than that, yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a safe and happy weekend, and keep your eyes wide open. I guess with that said, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the flip side.